This is the Slots and Socket Podcast, episode number 7. And
lucky number 7.
Yeah, lucky number 7. And I am one of your hosts, IRD Moose. And you are?
Turbo Penguin.
And in
How's it
tonight's
going, internet
episode,
web people?
hello, denizens of the internet. Yes,
Denise's?
we'll pass on that one. In tonight's episode, Asus has a leaky day. AMD claps back at some of the negative reviews, and Intel's got some CPUs coming out with a little bit of leakage there. A little more info on the 8800 XT has released, and AMSI goes back to the future. What do we got for driver updates this week, Turbo?
Okay, so NVIDIA has a driver as of the 20th of August, and Intel Arc, all three of you, there is an update as of August 24th. They haven't fired all of their drivers teams. They actually have an update.
Hey, look, I heard they made some sales, so now it's 4 people. We're going to have to update the meme. So
yep, exactly.
To kick off the main part of the show, let's get started with Asus leaking the 9900 x3D parts. Those look pretty cool. And what we were expecting sounds like might be the case.
I think everyone is going to take this with a grain of salt. I think everyone's excited about x3D. I think people in general are sort of on the fence, especially after how 9000 series looks non-x3D.
Yeah, they haven't done a great job of marketing the non-3D parts.
Nope, they did the pretty poor job there. So I think it looks interesting. I don't think we're expected to see these until 25. I think there was some talk and some rumors that maybe we would see a quick September. AMD, please don't do that. Finish your software, get the things working the way they should. Because I think that's really one thing. And I'll say this, if you look back and what we were hearing about the 9000 series going back, there were a lot of rumors about the performance uplift we were going to see with x3D on the 9000 series. Nothing has been confirmed, but I think from a gamer's perspective, a lot of gamers are looking at x3D and thinking, okay, come on, let's make this thing really good. Yeah, the 9000 series so far just looks okay. We'll see if we maybe see a bump. If we can get an x3D bump, I think it's going to be a bigger talking point than just the IPC that we saw with 9000. So it'll be interesting. A 9950 x3D at 16 core. The only for gamers, I don't know, a 16 core is hugely helpful unless you're doing some other task loads.
Right.
I think the positive thing could be, and the talking point on those, the 9950 x3D very well could be, if all 16 cores are x3D.
Well, and they're supposed to be. That according to the leak. Yeah.
We've heard that before. Look, the leak is that there is a performance bump in x3D, and that the top chip 9950 x3D would have a full set of x3D. If that's the case, that's going to be a crazy good card.
Yeah.
If you can get the 10 to 15, and let's be honest, maybe it's a 10 to 15 now on x3D. Maybe some more work goes into some software optimizations. Could that be 18 to 22? Possibly. Depends on what's left in 9000 series. But if you could bake 16 cores in x3D, and you could essentially, at that point, you would have roughly a little less than 400 megabytes of 3D cache.
Yeah.
That would be a very, very difficult processor for Intel to get back at.
For sure.
Speaking of reviews, so negative reviews, AMD thinks that they're all wrong.
Yeah, what's going on with this?
I don't know. I
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Because AMD's all over the shop. Their marketing is saying, "Oh, it's the best gaming processor ever," and everybody's saying,
But
"It's
reviews are
okay."
so all over the place. Like you've
Yeah,
got some people who say that this is horrible. You've got some reviewers saying it's the best thing since sliced bread, and some people say it's a great leap. And it's like it's confusing. It
right.
is absolutely confusing. And so for AMD to come back and be like, I don't know. I mean, it,
Yeah. Well, in some of the
it
coverage,
just
the
seems half baked.
the some of the issue that AMD I think is coming out with is that from Gamers Nexus reading of the release that they did on the website on their blog post, they didn't test the Intel CPUs with comparable settings. They didn't use defaults. They did tweaking and brought the lid down on the 14900K that they were testing against, and that's what caused the huge delta in numbers between AMD's part and Intel's part and what the reviewers are seeing on both. Now, interestingly, AMD had a statement on their blog post that called out that they were seeing 6% higher performance across 30 games, well, more than 30 games, when compared against the competition's best, which right now would be the 14900K. And they're saying not all reviewers are seeing these results, but they're not giving us any details why. And
Yeah, like
that's the problem. I mean, it's just a case of bullshots.
I mean, all I can say is that if we had one reviewer set come back and say, "Hey, we're not getting this,"
Yeah.
you might sit there and say, "Okay, you screwed up the test." Um, it's not one, it's
Yeah.
multiple. And the other piece I would say is that you have multiples, you know, I think this is a good reason of why we don't take marketing slide shots from a vendor
Mhm.
as reality,
Yep.
because if that's the case, then AMD, then these processors were horrible and we need to get new processors. But I don't think that's the case. To be honest, my 2 cents on this is AMD has some software they've got to release and they've got to make this better. And I think this is either microcode or chipset or drivers or schedulers or really a mix between all of these. I think when it's all said and done, I think 9000 series is not going to be viewed badly. But let's be honest, the 7000 series didn't have such an amazing launch, anyways, and it sold really well. So, I think it really goes back to AMD, fix your crap.
Yep.
Fix your crap and you'll sell processors because you don't have a competitor because nobody in their right mind is going to buy a 14th gen or the only safe Intel processors is a 12900,
Yep.
and I don't think anybody is going to drop 5, 6, $700 on an Intel if they're, A, watching this podcast and B, concerned that it's not going to fail.
Yep.
I think in general, 129 is a band-aid, and I think that's the general consensus of not only us, but I think that's most reviewers and the sentiment we're having. I don't think anyone trusts Intel right now. So
Yeah.
AMD, fix your crap and you'll make you look really good.
Well, and on that point, data centers are showing that they don't trust Intel because in Q2 the data center revenue
Yeah,
dropped relative to AMD, which we've never seen before.
they flopped it.
Um,
Yeah, it's flopped.
and the guest that was on the recent Broken Silicon had a phenomenal quote. Ultimately, Intel is brought down by the laws of physics because they're just brute forcing the performance. And that will only take you so far. And the problem is that because because Intel over the last, well, since Bulldozer hasn't done any significant innovations in the processor space, they're hosed. all because they've just been pushing frequency and voltage and more cores and more this
I mean,
and not getting
Intel has
clever.
done. They've made a dragster
Yeah.
with a 5 gallon tank of gas.
Yep.
It'll go really, really fast, really, really fast until it runs out of fuel and it fries itself. And then you ask it to turn, and it's like doesn't compute.
Yep.
Um, and the problem is that for synthetic testing, maybe that's still really good, but eventually you're going to run out of fuel and you're going to run out of time and you're going to fry the CPU. And you've got to figure out that there has to be a balance between voltage, thermals, and architecture. And to be honest, I think they've got since 12th gen probably all of those wrong.
Yeah.
13th and 14th, obviously. And it seems like behind the scenes, we're seeing some bad stuff from Intel.
Yep.
You know, just bad. Now, okay, I would love to meet the marketing guy that came up with the new Core Ultra 200V series.
Right.
V as in voltage. Seriously? Who does that?
Oh man.
And are you an idiot? I mean, V for value. Is it? Oh, it's a value segment now.
Right. Right.
No,
Like
it's
their
voltage
value
because
cores.
yeah, exactly. Apparently they're going to come out. There's a whole slew of them. You can take a look at them. Acer and Asus have confirmed laptops. They're coming out in October. If you want the Core 200 Ultra Voltage Edition, hopefully the V means we fixed the voltage problems. Who knows?
Yep.
We'll see. Okay, real quick, because we're talking voltage, because voltage is important.
Voltage is a thing.
Would you buy a 13th or 14th gen laptop with an Intel processor? 13800, 14900HX.
No. No, I wouldn't. And it's all because of what's going on the desktop because they share a common code base. Now, it's entirely possible that the ring bus issues and the voltage issues that they have on desktop aren't a factor in mobile, but considering my experience with the 14th gen laptop that my employer sent me for a daily driver, you couldn't pay me to touch one of those laptops.
Okay, so
My
now
next laptop's
would
going to be AMD.
would you be open to a lower skewed non-HX part on 13th or 14th gen?
I mean, I'd have no use for it because that's what I had it was a lower skewed part on 14th gen. And it was garbage. It was labeled as an i7, but it only had one P core and it had 10 economy cores. Wait, no, value
Efficiency.
cores. No, they're efficiency cores. That's what it is. That's what it
Efficiency.
is. And you know
The
what?
value might
Intel,
be it, because that's how you get the core count, right? I have a bunch
right.
of value cores and they're all
Oh,
slow.
and that's the thing. My IT department was like, but it's a 12 core.
Yeah.
Dude, it's one real core that's hyper threaded and 10 cell phone cores. Would you expect that to perform at all? And on that note, that's Intel's garbage marketing for you because they produce a single core i7 with a cell phone tacked onto it to the point where even Intel's own staff is recommending you buy AMD now. Like if the people working for the company are telling you to buy the competition, that's not that is worse than a marketing issue.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think we're really in an interesting spot here because, you know, Strix's hot point coming out on the laptop side looks to take a lot of market share away. And part of me thinks that the Core Ultra 200 voltage series, I'm going to call it voltage series, um, is more or less probably just to fend off and keep some of this. And my guess is that some of these companies that don't do AMD and have still put their allegiance to Intel, like Alienware and Dell, I think this is a way for Intel to say we have something new. Um, and we'll see how that goes in that market space. But It's clear that we're going to see a lot more competition on the CPU side between Intel and AMD. The real question is how much can AMD keep, and how much can how much can AMD claw away from Intel?
Right.
Um, so that's Intel news.
Well, we got a
Oh,
couple more for there. The benchmarks for the Core Ultra 9 285K did leak, and those are starting to show some interesting results. But again, would you want to go with an Ultra 9 285K after the 14,000 series
it's
issues?
polished. If it's pushing
It's
12 volts, let's do it. Come on, baby. Let's crank that voltage up.
hey, it doesn't have a V, so it's not the voltage edition.
I,
And following
sh-
on that, to try and spur more market buying things. Sorry, marketing terms are not my strength. I do tech support. Intel released an aggressively mid gaming bundle for Core and Arc. And this kind of straddles the line between CPU and GPU. So I figured this would be a good spot for it because seriously, who's going to buy an Arc CPU to get Assassin's Creed Shadows? I mean, if you've been following the reviews, if you've been following the news about that, And then
it's
Star Wars Outlaws, I mean, 2005 called, they want their graphics back.
here's the thing with Intel and Arc. Um, I think that there's enough for people to kind of realistically look at Arc and be like, oh, that was a nice try. Um, but I think the only reason people buy this is if it's like, hey, here's a $300 processor and a $300 graphics card, the next best thing. And by the way, this bundle is $300.
Yeah.
You know, and more or less just giving it away free. But all that's going to do is just like flood the used market with all these used parts. Be like, hey, I got a $300 part and I can sell this for $100. It means I get $200 parts. Um, I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
It just
With a game that,
yeah, with a
yeah.
game. Also a game
Eh.
too for $40, and now I've only spent
Right.
160.
Right.
I don't know. I just think it's kind of we'll see. I don't see there's a huge following of people buying processors for games. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but the other thing I really wanted to bring out here is as far as Intel goes, um, Intel's the news we are going to get out of Intel over the next year and a half is going to be horrible.
Oh, yeah.
It is all going to be bad. It's going to be firings. It's going to be bad morale. Um, and it's just going to be bad news without any happy music going on.
Yep.
I
I
think
agree.
the the best case scenario here for Intel um, is more or less trying really really hard to stay solvent.
Yeah.
I really if you start hearing about this, I think we're going to start talking about this topic a lot more frequently in the next 6 months.
Well,
Um,
what was
we
it? Intel
could
was
very well
talking. Oh,
no,
sorry.
we will be talking more on this because it's going to
Yeah.
be more and more bad news. But the question will be is can Intel survive? When
That's a
you
big
have to lay off
question.
as many people as you've had and you've been unprofitable as long as you have, and your competitor is really taking it to it. And I did not succeed in graphics. I did not succeed in AI. I did not succeed in mobile. And is my competitor just taking market share away from me left and right on every aspect, data center, desktop, laptop. I never got into mobile to begin with. I'm in a whole
Yep.
section of space that my competitor created, and I still can't compete in the mobile gaming. Because if you remember the MSI Claw that had the Intel, and
Mm-hmm.
it just got roasted because of how bad it is.
Yep.
to the point that I don't even, can you even buy an MSI claw anymore?
You could probably get one on eBay for cheap. Good luck getting parts, though.
Let's see, how much do they want to sell this thing for? It's the M1, it's the A1M,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to aim better.
I mean,
No,
it looks like
I
they're
can't even
still
buy it.
selling it. Wait. No, yeah, they're shop now.
So I can buy it on
Yeah.
Amazon for $560. That
Eh.
seems like an awfully high cost.
Gi-
Anyways,
Give
but
me a Stream Deck
they just
or
don't
Steam
have
Deck.
anything in that space. Yeah. I mean, they just don't have anything in that space. And so I, you've got to sell something, because if you don't sell something, you're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
And if all you're going to do is push warranty work, because that's going to be what they're going to be talking about the next, 12 to 18 months is warranty work. It's not good. So, and on to happier news.
Yeah. So the
Graphics card.
8800 XT might have been sandbagged as we suspected in the last episode. Looks like we're on Geekbench at least. We're getting 4080 performance at half of the price. It's going toe to toe and in some cases potentially beating the 4080. I would love to get my hands on an 8800 XT at this point because like we talked in the last episode, one of the things I was planning on doing was actually sitting down and playing a fair bit of Cyberpunk on my 6900 XT. I got it right that time. And yeah, I mean, I've been playing with fluid motion frames. It literally doubled my frame rate. The game was reporting mid 40s as far as a frame rate. But with fluid motion frames running, I was getting anywhere from 90 to 110 frames per second, and it was smooth as glass in 4K.
I
And
wish
I had it
I
on
wish
high.
AMD would I wish AMD would say this, because you do have to look in the driver for that to
Yeah,
see what your frame rate is,
yeah,
because what's being reported from the driver is not the frame rate.
right.
And they've said that. I think that they've not have done a very good job. And it would be really nice if maybe they could figure a way to solve it so that the games could actually pick up on the actual FPS. But um
Yeah,
look, if it's the 8800 XT or whatever the heck they're going to call it, this will be a very good thing for gamers. We talked about this last time. Gamers in general should be absolutely loving this.
yep.
Um,
Who cares if it's
and
fake
because
frames if you don't notice the difference and it makes the experience that much smoother.
we said this before, if
Yeah.
fluid motion is going to get a bump in its efficiency because of better RT performance,
Mm-hmm.
Part of me looks at a lot of games and says, okay, if RT isn't being used, um, what am I using these RT cores for?
Right.
And if AMD and NVIDIA can leverage these RT, these ray tracing portions of the node to enhance my gaming without me noticing, then I'm all up for it. And if that's the case, if we could see some more, I'm seeing really good results on 6,000, 7,000 Gen RX. This could be even bigger. And
Yeah.
if it goes from a 30 to a 35 or a 40% just with some performance upgrades, that looks amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they could do it, but if they could leverage the RT cores for that frame gen, in say version 3.1 where okay, we're not locking the feature down, but hey, if you're
If you
using
have
one of our
this, you can go
8000,
faster. Yeah.
you get even better. Which, that just means that your potential to run even higher quality settings on higher resolutions gets just that much better. And
So,
I mean,
Moose.
it looks like a beast.
So, Moose, what's your prediction for 8800 XT performance?
I'm gonna be a little conservative. I'm gonna say it's gonna be kind of in between the top end of a 4070 and the low end of a 4080. Because I mean, I really don't want to get my hopes up too much. That's
The
kind of where,
4070 Ti. That's kind of
yeah,
right in the middle.
yeah. So around there, and I think in that range, having the 16 gigs of VRAM is going to be a big boost because for the 4080, you're dropping $1,000 to get that 16 gigs right now, and I think what we're going to see if it is as the Geekbench results are showing, um, it's going to end up being some significant downward price pressure on Nvidia, and they're not going to like it one bit. Especially for the cards that are already on the shelves at Micro Center and for the board vendors, because they're now having to compete with a new card. The question is, what are we going to see for Nvidia's 5000 series?
Or, and I think like with Blackwell, I think, and maybe this was done intentionally from AMD, because the rumors and what we're kind of hearing is that the high end cards, the 5090, were going to come out first, and then following the 5080, 5070, and 5060 down that way. If this is correct, um, I could possibly see that flipping, where you see a 5060 and a 5090, followed by maybe the middle end cards or something along those lines, where you start seeing maybe that value oriented piece first. But that also means that they can get to that price and performance at the sales price. And I don't know if, I mean, I don't doubt it, because I think that they could sit there and lose money on it. Um, but if they do that, it's going to make things worse for them in the long haul, because eventually they do have some issues with the Department of Justice
Mm-hmm.
about price fixing. So
They got to pay those
um,
lawyers, and those lawyers are expensive. They
they're
cost a
probably,
4080 per hour usually.
yeah, if not a 4090.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I don't know. Well, I'm interested. It's intriguing, because for the first time we get something in the graphics card that's actually hopefully going to push pricing down.
Yep.
And I could see this pushing pricing down. And if it does, then I am absolutely all for it.
Yeah, I'm here for it too. Because I mean, GPUs have been ridiculous since right before the pandemic because of crypto mining, and then AI, and then a little
Work
bit of
from
crypto mining
home, and
again, work from home. Yeah, all that stuff. Pandemic created shortages, and we need a break, man. Gamers need a break, even on the high end. I mean,
do you think
there's a time when
if
$1,000 would buy you a high end system, a complete system.
if this comes out the right price point, would this shift into? Do you think this is going to shift into pricing down?
It's gonna have to, because I
Do
mean,
you think
they
they
were
can sell
pricing
a
based on Nvidia.
5090? I mean, if the 5090 sells at 1600, 1500, like the 4090, can they sell that if I have a $500 4080 equivalent?
There's going to be people who want to buy that just because AM or Nvidia is ahead of the game on AI.
Okay, so the
They're ahead of the
1%
game on,
at the very top.
yeah,
Okay, but let's
yeah.
talk about the 99, the rest of us.
Heck no. Pretty much all of us are going to go for that $600 card. And maybe the partner cards at 650, where you got a little bit better overclock, better cooling, things like that. Which actually, no, now that I think about it, it's all going to be partner cards, because AMD announced, didn't they, that they weren't releasing their own cards.
They
So
sold. They said they were not going to sell their cards on the website.
right.
Now, I'm interested to see what that means. I mean, from a partner's perspective, I can only guess that partners are like, "Hey, look, you did this thing so that you could sell cards at MSRP and say people you did this,
Mhm.
but come on, you're hurting our sales." And on the AMD side, I think that makes more sense, because in general, they've sold fewer cards, and there's been some loyalty there with some of these. And now the other payoff for this is, I believe, was it who was stopped making Radeon cards with that MSI?
That was MSI. Yeah, MSI dropped Radeon and went
Yeah,
Nvidia
so
only
MSI
this
dropped
series.
Radeon, so it'll be interesting to see if MSI has any negative thoughts on that, choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because AMD is returning to the typical model that Nvidia followed before the pandemic, because there was a long time where Nvidia never actually sold a Founders Edition. They only came out with the Founders Edition because the card manufacturers, the Nvidia would set their MSRP and the card manufacturers would just be like, okay, well here's our price, and Nvidia never had a card MSRP.
Hmm.
And so, they started with the Founders Edition and they set the bar even higher. And then, well, what do the partners do? They went just that much higher. And then, of course, all the ratcheting up of pricing over the last few years, inflation, all the other craziness. It's just kind of gotten out of hand with GPU pricing, and it needs to come down. So,
I think this is probably a smart piece for AMD because there's definitely some lag in the economy, I think, from a lot of people. And I think a lot of people have a negative view overall of the economy. And if you can get this, in that price point of value segment, this is going to do very well. And I think that this could very well be a value segment oriented positioning in the market to say, you know what? We're going to get a bunch of sales. We've owned this space before. We know how to do this. And, um, maybe we really just do this and we start to maybe break into that. Well, we're fast. Maybe next time we're faster than the 5080, in that value segment. Because the more people you get onto Radeon, I think the more people will be like, hey, this is pretty good. To be honest,
yep.
it's not bad.
No,
All right,
it's a
motherboards.
good thing. Yeah, so MSI goes back to the future. You remember way back when we had extra power connectors on our motherboards for things like AGP cards that drew a little too much, or
Hmm.
early PCI Express before we had the PCI Express cabling standard. MSI's added PCI Express ports to their next gen motherboards, adding about what is it, 150 watts of capacity to the PCI Express bus itself.
So I could see this, especially with the people putting the zero cable notion where all of your connectors in the back of the motherboard. I could absolutely see something like this doing and being fairly good, with the notion that you could plug it in. The downside, and I think, what's interesting though, is it bumps up to 225 watts from the PCI Express slot.
Hmm.
Um, and that goes for a bunch of cards, but let's be honest here, this is not going to power a 4080. It's not going to power a 4070. Okay.
Right.
This is going to get you down to what, a 4060, a 60 series,
Maybe a
a
4070. Yeah.
7600 XT,
But I don't think that's the goal though, because usually for stuff like this, they're meant for the higher end parts. Because I look at the 4090 right now, that card's drawing upwards of 600 watts, and by all accounts, that's mainly because it's limited by the capacity of the cable. And what's that cable doing? It's starting to melt. So I think this is actually MSI's attempt to offset some of that power delivery so the card can pull more from the PCI Express bus and get a little extra headroom on that 12 volt high power connector that's melting on the higher end cards. It
uh,
also could serve to power lower end cards, but since it's just one brand doing it, kind of like Asus's special power dealie that they have, um, I don't see that. I really would be surprised if we see anyone but MSI release a auxiliary powerless graphics card in coming generations.
I think that we're doing this as a holdover. In all honesty, I do think in the future APUs are going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be saying, I want an AMD Radeon APU, and I'll have a socket, and these are the CPUs and GPUs I have. And it might be to the point where you just buy a board and replace the board, or you put your solid state from board one into board two, and that's your
Yep.
upgrade. I don't
Yeah.
know what the future looks like here. Um, you know, 800 watts for an NVIDIA graphics card. If that is the notion of where we're going, then AMD needs to, NVIDIA really needs to look at this from a performance and efficiency side of things, because they've pushed performance, pushed performance. You
Hmm.
have to at one point get some efficiency out of these cards, because nobody wants a 900 watt, 1,000 watt dedicated card. At 800 watts,
I mean, if
just
they
for my
ship me
graphics card.
one, I'm not going to complain.
I mean, but
But,
you
yeah,
realistically
you're
speaking,
right.
you'd have to have a 15, 16. Almost an 1,800 watt. I mean, if you look at the efficiency side of things. And so,
Well,
um,
yeah. And
if
it seems to me like Nvidia's been playing the same brute force, just yeet more power, yeet more cores, and yeet more frequency at it game that Intel's been playing. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find out somewhere down the line that maybe in a generation or two, if Nvidia doesn't start chasing efficiency again, we might see similar things like with Intel's 14th and 13th gen issues, where the cards
I,
just start nuking themselves.
efficiency has to play a role here, and I think that's going to have to be in the next, because I don't think anyone's saying or predicting the 5,000 series to be an efficiency. I think it's purely just performance.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any talk of that. Maybe on the laptop side, there is some talk that maybe a 5060 is going to see some efficiency side. So maybe on laptop. But I mean, I personally think that a lot of that efficiency side on the laptop piece is, they've got to get to a point where they can start really putting together some efficiency things, because NVIDIA should be playing in this mobile, handheld game marketplace, and they're not, because the only person who owns that place is someone who can do it all together on the APU side. And AMD is doing very well with that, because nobody can compete. And
Yeah.
unless Intel and NVIDIA are going to team up, I don't think that's going to happen. Um, unless Intel decides that they want to sell to AMD, to NVIDIA. Um, that would be an interesting thought and process, if it gets that bad. But I don't know. I mean, there's some real issues here. Um, I don't know. The other half, I would think that you have to have a motherboard with a very specific card to allow 225 through the PCI Express,
Hmm.
or will all cards allow that to do that? I don't think they're designed to have that much power going to PCI Express.
No.
And at 225 watts, that's not a small amount. I would be very concerned, because that's a lot of power going through, and having some bleed over between those. You got to really make sure that your data circuits and power circuits are safe.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's really easy to get some crossover and start having some negative complications from board design, especially when we're talking that much power. There's a
Yeah.
reason that no one else has done this, MSI. People have thought this, and my guess is that they've maybe backed off because they've had some issues. So maybe MSI fixed it, but I mean, part of me looks at this and says, if we look at what's going on with the zero cable initiatives, like, we've got some really good, interesting ideas for people to bypass this. I don't understand the huge, thing to be like, yeah, I want to get rid of my cables.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time it was, we want cables and we want fancy cables. Now now cables are evil.
Well, and I think the fancy cables was more of a workaround for the issue of, well, we
Ugly.
don't really have a way to hide the cables, so let's make them pretty, or as pretty as we can. And so,
People have done this behind the motherboard thing, though, in the past. You've got modders who have done this
yeah,
and flipped the pin layout on these and just soldered directly onto the boards.
yep,
So nothing of what we're looking at here is anything new. This could have been done a long time ago.
mhm,
In fact, me and you have talked about this. I've always wanted to do something like this. Now you can just buy it, which is kind of cool. But I mean, that seems like a fad, and a part of me thinks that this MSI with additional power to the motherboard is either a really bad idea or something that's maybe not going to get caught off.
yeah,
But at the same time, I thought that ASUS with the power little connector on the motherboard was a bad idea, only because it forced you to kind of mix your motherboard and your graphics card. But um, I don't know. And those are expensive cards and motherboards to begin with. So
yeah.
I guess
Well,
if
I
you're going
mean,
to spend that much money, you might as well do the whole thing 9 yards, right?
yeah, I mean, as far as the Asus thing, I kind of like it just from the standpoint of it does make things a lot cleaner. Um, it looks like it's a reasonably well designed connector, and the only drawback is it's only Asus. You can't go and buy a power color graphics card with your Asus board and take advantage of that feature. You can't buy an Asus card with that connector and plug it into a Gigabyte board. And
I mean, I think
there's
Asus right
only
now
one
wants it
card.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Asus wants it that way. I think they know that. So
Yeah,
I don't
which I
know. I
don't blame
mean,
them. I mean, they were the first mover in the segment, but I mean, it needs to become a standard,
I think
just
that
like
the
the AUI
behind,
ports.
yeah, I think the cable connectors in the back, I think there's enough sales that will get people to do this.
Yeah.
The question is this going to be like BTX where people are just like, whatever, and you stop supporting it? It could be, it really could be. Um, it really depends on how far MSI wants to go, and if so, can they get other manufacturers to be like, yeah, that actually isn't a bad idea. But in all honesty, MSI almost have to be something where it's like you legitimately plug it in and this is how we do this so that we don't jack stuff up. Um, uh, it's going to have to be kind of, we're not going to charge people or pay people to do this. This is how you do this. I think they just got to make it open,
Yep.
but that means that they're going to give something away for free that they don't necessarily want to. So,
Yeah.
and on
So,
that
yeah.
note, I think that's it.
I think that does wrap up the show. So thank you everybody for watching. Appreciate you giving us your time. And be sure to check us out each week as we do new podcasts. Remember to like and subscribe and do some comments in the doobly doo down there. And I think until next time, I shall say have fun storming the castle.
Take care.
Good night, everybody.